Welcome to the Greenlight Podcast, where we imagine a better future and take concrete steps to make it happen. I'm here today with Jane Kashnig, and she is part of our Earthlings interview series, talking to people who are using time out of their day to do something that helps the earth. So welcome, Jane. It's so great to have you.
It's wonderful to be here, actually.
So, Jane, you work with the Parks Department, and you're doing things outside with seeds in various seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about the project, what they do in different seasons?
My interest in the project is in the prairie restoration work. When I started volunteering, the parks naturalist showed us a piece of paper, just an ordinary piece of paper, and then he pinched off this little tiny piece. And he said the paper was the prairie lands in Wisconsin before agriculture and industrialization, and the little pinched off piece is what's left.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And so, I sort of broke my heart, to be honest.
Yeah.
But the things that we do seed collection in the midsummer through October. What we're doing is we're collecting seeds that are of plants that are indigenous to that area. So
Nice.
We know that they are going to work in that area when we restore prairies. Then we do seed cleaning in October and November and early December. That means that we just take off all of the chaff and we prepare them in little plots for spreading seed on our newly restored areas. In winter, we clear cut and we burn piles of invasive trees and brush that have crowded out native species. We open up the areas that are overgrown and we scatter those seeds. We especially like it if it snows because you can scatter the seeds and you can see that you've broadcasted them. And what happens is the seeds will germinate better if they are exposed to that type of cold. So the other thing that you want to think about when you think of prairie is you want to think about fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, because prairie, that essentially is the essential element. So in the spring, we do low intensity burns to clear out species that can't tolerate fire. And we open up the seed bank that is in the soil. So whatever is remaining of seeds that were indigenous to the land at the time. And in the summer, we hand clear invasive species. What I love about it, of course, is there's something to do every day, every week, every month, every year.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Yeah, those prairie fires are really fun to do. My dad used to have some land out in the country and we did a controlled burn, and boy, it's still a lot of fire.
It's still a lot of fire. And the thing is that the park systems has staff and it has a lot of volunteers, but it does a lot of training.
Yeah.
So you need to be trained before you are permitted to work on anything that might be hazardous, such as prairie fires.
And then they've got people with water backpacks and hoses and things at the ready.
They do. And this is the same thing when we go and we clear wood. You have to be trained in sawing, in appropriate techniques of sawing. And that means that I'm just a hauler because I'm not trained.
You're not a sawyer.
I'm not a sawyer anyhow. But the thing is, when you start opening up and seeing the land being cleared of that brush, and you can look up at the top and you can see what we did last week was we looked up at the top and there was a meadow that people didn't even know was there.
Really?
Yeah. But, I do like it. Every week I can do something.
How did you get involved with doing this, with all the seed collecting and everything?
Well, being outdoors has always made me feel whole. It makes me feel connected. I have a little picture that shows two little tiny people on the edge of a cliff, and then there's this big vast sky, and the caption is, please make sure to capture how insignificant I am. Okay, but what it does for me is it makes me understand that I am part of something that's eternal. So during the pandemic, the active part of the pandemic when nobody could go anywhere, I had deer that I think they practically came up and sniffed me, that kind of thing. But what I noticed was the Dane County Park signs were everywhere. So what I decided to do was look up the Dane County Parks and the websites and see what they had. And they had these events. And what I found was that they had volunteer opportunities, and I decided to give it a try.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I can still remember the first time I volunteered. Number one, I got lost getting there, of course.
Oh no.
Yeah, anyhow, but once I finally got there, I was collecting seeds, and I can even remember my first seed. It was Culver's root. And so I said to the person, am I allowed to go off trail? She said, absolutely. And I went like, yeah. Anyhow, I said, well, what if I trample things? She says, you're not as big as a buffalo. Don't worry about it. And so that was, that's what hooked me. It was the fact that I could go out off trail, and the more I was collecting, the more I could see.
That is so fun.
Yeah,
Wow. I
it
love
is
the
fun.
idea of
Yeah.
this area with the prairie was roamed by the
Buffalo.
buffalo.
It was, and it's made to be tramped on to some extent. I mean, I'm not going to tramp on it a lot. What I, find is when I roam off trail, I will do things like this last summer. I said to the parks person I was working with, I said, do you realize there's wild roses back there?
Yeah.
And he said, oh, I was looking for that patch, but I couldn't find it. The thing is, do you realize there's this? Do you realize there's that? Or can you tell me what this is? That's the other thing that I really love a lot, is tell me what I'm seeing. It's amazing. In fact, they call it prairie bathing, which I think is hysterical.
Oh yeah, because there's forest bathing, right?
Forest
We're just
bathing.
going out and enjoying nature in the woods.
Exactly. And pretty much everybody who goes out volunteering that I know of, I would say 100% of the people that I know of are expressing the same feeling.
Wow.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different motivations. What keeps people coming back is the feeling that one, I am one with the nature. I am an earthling, so to speak. And the other is that I am with people who feel like I feel.
You've talked about all these wonderful feelings of connection. What else do you like about this volunteer work?
I think one of the things that really struck me was how much variety there is in nature and how quickly things change throughout the day or across the seasons or even year to year. So I didn't realize, for example, that I would have a favorite plant and then I would go to look at it in the following week and it would have already gone to seed. And now it is that plant that I had been recognizing but didn't recognize it when it was in blossom. The other thing was interesting is we went to collect marsh betony. The previous year it had been plentiful, and this year we went to collect it, and every little marsh betony plant had been nibbled off by a deer.
Really?
Yeah. And what had happened is it was drier, so there weren't as many. So we ended up having to cook something else instead. And the adaptation and how much the land had changed in that 1 year was surprising to me. And the naturalist said to me, that happens all the time. And it's like, oh, I can't wait to see what's going to happen next year. I think the thing that I also like is what tremendous variety there is. I didn't realize that a healthy prairie has 150 plant species per acre.
Per acre?
Per acre.
That is a lot of different plants.
Yes, and you'll get down there and you'll start saying, oh my gosh, there's this, and this. Okay, and all the multitude of groups that collaborate with us. So, for example, there is people who are prairie enthusiasts. You'll get the prairie enthusiasts. You'll get the fisheries. You'll get all sorts of different city parks and the county parks. Then there's Operation Fresh Start, which is an education program.
I didn't realize they were involved in the prairies.
And then you'll get schools that there's a charter school here that has an environmental emphasis. And so they bring them out and teach them how to do the kinds of things that we do and why this is so important. The other thing that I like is discovering what's going to be happening with a particular area, that there's a long-range plan. For example, I didn't realize that there's a trout stream on one of the properties, and that eventually when we get the restoration work up to the stream, they're going to be able to restore the banks to make it a trout stream again.
That's so exciting.
It is for me. Kind of gives you an idea. I mean, it's just you learn so much. I learn so much every day. And whether it's the land itself that's teaching me or the naturalists or the other volunteers, because all of the other volunteers have so much experience and reasons why they too are coming out. And
I know that you are also enthusiastic about prairies, though you're not representing the prairie enthusiast. Yeah. What would you like to tell us about the prairie ecosystem?
In south central Wisconsin, prairies aren't what you would think of, like these tall grass prairies. They're not. They are largely, or were largely, oak savanna, which is a big field that has a very big oak tree in the middle of it, if you can think of it like that. We had short grass prairies, we have wetlands, and the other thing we have that's pretty interesting to me is sand prairies. Anyway,
I've never heard of a sand prairie.
Yeah, it's essentially, you can find it in land that wasn't arable, it wasn't workable for farming. So
because it wasn't farmable land.
It wasn't
so
farmable
people just
land.
Worked around it.
People were, exactly. Someone was enthusiastic enough to try to farm it. They knew after the first year it wasn't working. But the oak savanna prairies are one of the most threatened habitats in the world.
Really?
Yeah. So my first encounter with actually an oak savanna was through, we have the Ice Age Trail Alliance here.
Yes.
And
yes.
They have a trail that goes through the Devil's Lake area. And there's this picture, and it says, this little area here that you're looking at was an oak savanna prairie. It just captured my attention because of what the rich variety and how much has been lost. But the Dane County Parks themselves is more than the Prairie Project. It's 17,000 acres, and it includes 20 wildlife areas.
Wow.
There are 14 natural resource areas, and there are 2 forests, and one of those forests is actually one that I've done some restoration work in. Anyway, the Prairie Restoration Project itself started really small, like in the 1990s. It was one guy, one staff person who collected seeds, and he stored them in his garage.
Wow.
Until his wife brought his boss in and said, we need a place. Anyhow. So, you can see some of these early ones. They'll say, that's a Wayne Pauley prairie. It might be 20 acres or something like that. But in the last 2 years, which is how long I've been involved in it, each year that the parks have restored 300 or more acres of prairie.
Really?
And, yeah. And so the thing about it is, someone says, well, why in the heck would you want to do this? The prairies are situated in areas where there's farming. They are situated in areas where there's hunting. So there's all sorts of different riparian or, water areas like this. And that biodiversity that they create is the resiliency that we're looking for.
Yes.
And so I kind of think of the prairie, people who work in the prairie are as diverse as the prairie itself. And that diversity is where our strength comes from. Because at any point in time, like, for example, the marsh bethany was eaten by the deer that year, but there is something else that fills it in.
Yeah.
And it'll come back. And so for me, the relevance of this is diversity and change. We don't all have to be alike, that our resiliency comes from our differences.
Yeah. So if you have 150 different species, you're a heck of a lot more resilient.
Yes, exactly. Or, you get all sorts of pollinators. Your pollinators require that diversity.
Yes.
Yes. So it's just everything to me is, I want to say, a metaphor. So the prairie is a metaphor.
If you like getting out in nature, then follow in Jane's footsteps and check out an organization that'll help you volunteer and learn about what's going on out there. You can check your city parks, your county parks, your state parks, and if you are in the UK, you can check with your local council or look for something like the Avon Wildlife Trust, which is our local wildlife organization. And I'm looking forward to going out and helping them do some brush clearing and some other things this spring. So take care, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the Greenlight EcoPod. I'm Jala. You can get in touch with us on Instagram at Greenlight EcoPod, and we have so much more on the Greenlight EcoPod YouTube channel. Our theme music is by Ryan Walker, and additional video editing by a 13-year-old.